Hey everybody, welcome back to the movie shelf, where we take a movie off the shelf, watch it, and then put it up against every other movie that we watched with a ranking between 0 and 100. This week, and it's based on your suggestions mostly. Not this week because I do multiple of these week. But this time we're doing 1982's Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and this comes from Tom Wishman. So, Tom, this one is for you, and I hope you enjoy the review. Um, this was Amy Heckerling's directorial debut. Up until this point, she had only directed student films, and she went on to do Clueless and a couple episodes of some TV stuff. But the major thing here is this was actually a story by famous filmmaker Cameron Crowe. And this is one of his early writings. It's based on a book that he did in 1981. The movie is fiction. However, Cameron Crowe did go undercover in, I think it was Claremont High School in San Diego, for a year. He went undercover, befriending everybody, and supposedly these tales in this film are based on those experiences. It's hard to say what the plot of this film is. It's just, first of all, this is like the second big ensemble cast film that I've done. The first one was The Poseidon Adventure. So there's a lot to talk about and a lot of people to talk about. Um, but I love Cameron Crowe. He's an amazing director and filmmaker in his own right. And one of the things I love the most about his films is the music. He was not afforded the musical choices. The studio pretty much said these are the songs you have to use, with very few exceptions. So let's talk about the cast first. You got Phoebe Cates, beautiful, beautiful Phoebe Cates. She plays Linda Barrett. Jennifer Jason Leigh's in this. She plays Stacey Hamilton. You've got Brian Backer, who plays Mark Ratner. Now, if you don't know, um, this is based off a real dude. I don't remember his name, but he actually went on to make software for Windows and no, he wrote a book, Windows for Dummies. It was a New York Times bestseller. And he's one of the guys that Cameron Crowe was following while he was undercover at Claremont High there. Um, you got Sean Penn as Jeff Spicoli. Now, Sean Penn did not have to audition for this. He just had a conversation uh, with Cameron Crowe and Amy Heckerling, and he had the part. I mean, if you've seen the movie, you know. Well, if you've seen Sean Penn, you know what an amazing actor this is, and this performance is amazing, although the role is somewhat beneath him as an actor. It wasn't at the time. Um, but it's also said that he stayed in character throughout the filming of this, which would have been an absolute riot on the set. Judge Reinhold, I believe he was Amy Heckerling's neighbor, upstairs neighbor. So she found him. A lot of these people are recognizable names now, but they weren't big names back then, which is one of the problems that the studio had with the film once it was completed. They didn't think it had any star power. Now listen to this. You got Robert Romanus. He played Mike Damone. Um, and I want to say this. This is for you, Tom, because I know you're a Zeppelin fan. He says to Rat, he says, when he's giving him advice about going on a date, he says, put on side one of Led Zeppelin's four, uh, anytime you get the chance, basically. Is, I don't remember the direct quote, but it's something to that nature. And then the next thing they show is, you would expect to hear Black Dog, which is the first track on Led Zeppelin's four, but instead you hear Kashmir. And I know that that's always bothered you, and that Kashmir is not even on Led Zeppelin 4. But anyway, I'd be remiss to not mention that. Ray Walston you have in this film. He plays Mr. Hand, the teacher that's in conflict with Spicoli all the time. Nicolas Cage. This was his feature film debut. He was the only cast member that was under 18 at the time, and you needed to be 18 to be in this movie, even though it was about high school students because of the nudity and the subject matter. But Nicolas Cage actually lied on his application for this film. Let's talk about him for a minute. He's barely in it. He actually he's credited as Nicholas Coppola in this film. And for those of you that didn't know that, that's his real name. This film actually forced him to make the change to Nicolas Cage because he auditioned for the part of Brad like 11 times, didn't get the role, and then they basically threw him in as a hamburger prep cook, just to put him in the film. And he thought that he didn't get that role because of the name Coppola. Well, Francis Ford Coppola, no relation, I don't think, already had the market on the name Coppola, and he thought that was going to hamper him for the rest of his career. And the reason he thought that is because other cast members were heard outside of his trailer, yelling lines from Coppola's movies. And he just made him really insecure. So he came up with Nicolas Cage, and he's been Nicolas Cage from that point on. Other notables: Eric Stoltz. This was his film debut. He's credited as Stoner Buddy, Stoner Buddy 1. I don't know. Forrest Whitaker's in this film. He plays Charles Jefferson, the football player. He actually had to gain 50 pounds to play this role. Anthony Edwards from ER and Revenge of the Nerds. He plays Stoner Buddy 1 or 2, whichever one. Very few lines, but and he has hair in this film. So it's kind of cool to see these guys in the film. And that's basically most of the cast. There's a lot of people some that I may mention later on down the road, just that have flashing parts throughout the film, but that makes up your character base of the ensemble, which again, back then, bunch of nobodies, but now these people have gone on to do many, many great things. So we have, this is basically one of the first mall movies ever made. And when this film was actually pitched to the studio wanted David Lynch to direct it, and he poo-pooed it. And then once he met with Amy Heckerling, I don't think that his hopes were high because she hadn't directed anything but student films, but they started going over the book, and she loved the book, and she wanted to incorporate as much of the book as she possibly could, because she thought there was just so much great material there, and she wanted to make it mall-centric. And Cameron Crowe really took to that, and he's like, she gets it. So away they went, and they made this film. Nancy Wilson is Cameron Crowe's wife in real life. She makes an appearance in the film when Brad's character, played by Judge Reinhold, gets fired from his job at All American Hamburger. He works at Captain Hook's Fish and Chips, and he gets laughed at he's going to make a delivery, and he gets laughed at a stoplight by someone that's credited as, I think it's Beautiful Girl in Car. Yeah, that's Nancy Wilson. That's Cameron Crowe's wife. She gets to make a brief cameo in this film. One of the things I was thinking as I was researching and watching this film is, I wonder if Kevin Smith's Mallrats ever gets made, if this film doesn't get made. Something to ponder. Kevin Smith's Mallrats is another great one. I'm sure it'll get reviewed at some point, whether it be by suggestion or just random chance, because it's definitely on the movie shelf. I like to do a little bit of trivia when we do this stuff. There's not really much I can say about the actual plot, because it's just kids hanging out and kids having sex. It's a teen sex comedy, one of the first. actually, when the film was finished and delivered to the studio, they didn't want to put it out. They were worried how they were going to make their money back based on a cast that's a bunch of nobodies. And some of the members of the studio actually compared it to pornography, which is ridiculous if you watch it. There's a few nude scenes, a few promiscuous sex scenes. There's nothing really here to balk about, especially in today's age of cinema. They finally did decide to put it out in a couple theaters on the West Coast, and people kept going and going and going and reciting the lines over and over and over, just like Rocky Horror Picture Show. So they decided, we'll go ahead and release it out to the public. But they literally spent no money making this attempt to get people to go see it across the country. I do believe it became, in like 2005, it became part of the Library of Congress as a relevant movie to the era. So that shows them. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? There's a sequence in here that I found interesting. Spicoli has this dream sequence where he's being interviewed at a surfing competition that he's won, and he's there with two bikini-clad women, just talking about how awesome his life is and how he's just going to party and where he's going to go to Hawaii and Australia. The interesting thing about this scene is that was actually written to be on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, but Johnny Carson passed, and then Merv Griffin passed, and then Tom Snyder passed, and then David Letterman passed, and so on and so forth. Any one of those scenes would have made the movie even better, but they ended up making a surfing competition because, again, I think it was just tied to a bunch of no names, and Carson was just above it. I don't know. Letterman was above it. I'm sure Letterman, in retrospect, probably would have been like, oh man, I wish I would have taken that. He did not, however, and we ended up where we are today, which is fine. It's a classic film. It's a great watch. I hadn't watched it in a long time, so when he mentioned that he wanted me to review that one, it was an easy yes. I was always looking for the next film to do, and I never know until somebody says something and a light bulb comes on. I'm like, yes. So speaking of star power on this film, I'm going to name some of the names that were looked at for roles in this film. And not only would it have given it a star power boost, which it doesn't need now, but back in the day would have given it a huge star power boost that probably would have made this film not only different, which I don't think it needs to be different. I think it falls right where it needs to fall. And I mean, let me just tell you, and then you can make your own decision. Let's see. Tom Hanks, one of the names. Jodie Foster, Matthew Broderick, Michelle Pfeiffer, considered for various roles. Hanks was up for the part of Brad, I think, and Broderick was considered for the role of Spicoli. That would have been hilarious. Jodie Foster, Diane Lane, and Brooke Shields were thrown in the mix when they were casting Stacy. Both Melanie Griffith and Tatum O'Neal missed out on playing Linda. And this one I thought was the most interesting. Fred Gwynn, a name you don't hear a lot, but he played Herman Munster in the television show The Munsters. He was originally offered the role of Mr. Hand, but he turned it down because he too was worried about star power and thought it was a little too sex-centric for his liking. But that would have been epic to see Herman Munster as Mr. Hand. That said, Ray Walston did an amazing job. Some sad news. I mean, we've had time to get over it, but Lana Clarkson, who played Mrs. Vargas, she was briefly seen at the high school dance scene. She was actually shot and killed by Phil Spector, the record producer, at his mansion in 2003. He did this in 2003 and he wasn't convicted until 2009. That's kind of messed up. So we get through the film. Um, I think Heckerling wanted to originally keep the fate of each of the kids open-ended and not give it an ending. I don't know if she was planning any kind of sequel or anything like that. But she didn't want to nail down anything that was going to be for certain forever. But the studio, man, when they're paying for stuff, they always got to stick their nose in it. And they really liked oh, what was the movie? American Graffiti. They really liked 1973's American Graffiti. They liked the ending of that and how it tied up everything nicely in a bow for everybody. So they insisted that they come up with some ending for each character. And to me, that's the worst part of the entire movie. It detracts from everything else that the movie um, gave us, because I kind of feel like they're delinquent. I'm not even going to bother reading it. You can watch it and see the endings and how it ends up. But when you're reading them, you're literally going to be shaking your head thinking, this is a dumb ending for almost every single character. It's supposed to be funny, but it's not funny. It was just a stupid idea by the studio, and it takes a couple points off the film for me, which is no fault of Heckerling and no fault of Cameron Crowe. But unfortunately, that's the way the movie came out, and we're not ranking those people, we're ranking the film. All of this said, definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it. Sean Penn absolutely shines in this film. Um, I would say Judge Reinhold, you could tell that he was going to be a pretty good actor and some cool things after this. Phoebe Cates obviously didn't do terribly too much, but she is absolutely gorgeous and charming in this film, as is Jennifer Jason Leigh. We've all known people like her character. Um, so that said, let's get to the ranking here. I'm gonna have to give this film an 85.4. I'm giving it an 85.4. And that brings it into third place, I believe, nudging out Yesterday, just below The Poseidon Adventure. So that's what we have for the movie shelf. Please like, subscribe, comment. These things are super important to the algorithm, and it helps these things get more views. And the more views that we get, the more of these I can do. If you hate me, thanks for watching this one at least. Until then, I'll see you next time on the movie shelf.